I'm fixing to take a walk because that's the way you do it. I figured I'd take a walk, no bike ride. It's a little bit cooler now, which is nice. And maybe take a video or something, or a photograph while I walk around. That's the kind of idea, anyway. See how that works. I got this bearskin hoodie, which is no big deal. It's kind of like an overhyped thing you buy from some advertisement you saw on the web. But it's nice, it works. It's got a lot of pockets. Geezers love pockets because we like to have our important stuff. You know, you gotta have a man bag or a backpack, a bug out bag. Gotta have some pockets. You know, those old like photographers' vests or fishermen's vests. You know, you gotta have your gear, your tools, your stuff. It's very important. So with this particular getup, I can put my filter and my camera stuff, recorder, a little tiny tripod. Yeah, so I feel like there has been a denial of service attack or something like that. 503 JSON or something. You know, something happens to the servers or to the network. One of my friends is in the business of fiber optic networks, was in telecom and then migrated over to media, sports, and so on. So these big networks to, display sports. I got a problem with my sinus and it feels like a toothache. And so I talk kind of weird because when I close my mouth, it hurts like a toothache. So that's why I'm talking more lispy than usual. Anyway, no one cares. So yeah, my friend's in that business. And if you know what's on certain networks, pipelines, different server farms, providers, if you're clever, you can ratchet or you can interrupt a service. Of course, you could, there's you have to maintain these servers all the time. But it's interesting when you see a certain clump of services, especially if they're alternative media platforms, Substack, Medium, and other ones. And I don't know if they all use the same service. It's possible. But if they did, that would be a certain bottleneck. Because if you wanted to mess with those sources of information, you could easily do something to make, the service crash, for lack of a better term, more technical term. And then, sorry, you can't get to us. And of course, you know who's running these businesses. And when you think about some of the nuts in the test reel bundle community, Silicon Valley and elsewhere around the world, including, well, I won't say it, but Peter Thiel, obviously, and people like that, but if they wanted to cause trouble with where you get your information, they could. And obviously, there are plenty of people working on providing you with the kind of information they want you to have. So yeah, propaganda is a thing, definitely a thing. Well, my friend bought this building here and they just started clearing the trees and whatnot to redo it. Wow. So, might as well take a photo of that so you know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, the propaganda is a thing, and PR and marketing, as I always say, and it's profoundly effective. And the tools we have at our disposal to operate and disseminate that are incredibly powerful, as well as the science and behind it now, the data science, as well as psychology and on and on. And all of these dark experiments from the security state over the years has also produced a profound knowledge base in the dark arts of persuasion, hyper-persuasion, and so on. So we're all subject to it, whether we want to think so or not. The big thing about, I think, most people, when they don't want to look at these things or they want to write them all off as conspiracy theories. And I do differentiate between a conspiracy theory that has some theoretical basis, which means some lines of evidence to support it, and a conspiracy story, which is just nonsense. So a conspiracy theory might end up one day uncovering a true conspiracy. Anyway, so, you know, we have all these defense mechanisms, cognitive dissonance, and we have cognitive biases that are natural to us, and just human reactions that help us not deal with reality. If we were living in a world where reality is like, if you don't find food, you starve to death, then you don't have a problem with reality versus stories around the fireplace or painting art on cave walls, because you can imagine whatever stories you want to imagine to get through the day in the scary world of unpredictable magical nature. But now we're so sophisticated. We are so much more educated and aware of things. And, the scientific revolution, all that stuff. And so we think we know it all, but we don't. And the primitive human is still there. And so we're all vulnerable to these stories and cognitive biases and just natural human stuff. Our species is very good at making tools and whatnot, and growing in the sense of exploiting energy and resources. So maximum power principle and Jevons paradox, and exponential growth in numbers, whether however you want to look at it. We're good at all that kind of stuff. So our whole existence has been migrating around the planet, exploiting resources. And then once we got to the civilized stage, for whatever reasons you want to talk about agricultural, life ways or whatever. Anyway, we scaled up, made more tools, started competing among ourselves, immediately started killing each other to exploit resources, and you never have enough. The more you have, the more you need to use. And so we have these cycles, civilizational, Turchin kind of cycles of civilization. You grow, you bump into each other, shit happens, whether it's natural stuff, climate change, or whether it's natural disaster or famine or disease, whatever. You overhunt a region, destroy the soil, you move on, you bump into each other, you have wars. That's the story of our life, our species' existence, and it's been that way forever, since the beginning. It's not going to change. It's just that now we have more tools, more complex tools that requiring more energy and resources, and so we have to use it. Artificial bullshit, no, intelligence, quote unquote, is not intelligent. It's just a more complicated way of, using information that requires more energy and resources to access. I love a LLM research librarian as much as the other guy who likes doing research, but it's not the answer to anything. The predicaments that we face are locked in. They're not going anywhere. And our leaders are in denial because they're not incentivized at all to think about this kind of stuff. So they come up with stories, whether it's stories about politics or economics or religion or whatever it is, whatever it might be, to bolster what they're doing, what they get paid for. All of it's really nonsense when you think of it, because we can't replace the earth with a machine that lasts forever and makes you immortal. It's not going to happen. Life begets life. Life depends on life. The cycles of life, if you study entropy, thermodynamics, and life cycles, it's pretty miraculous and amazing how it works. And it has all kinds of feedbacks built into it, and fail-safes. And, you look at R and K species, for example. There's so many examples of how nature balances itself out. And we are nature, so we're not immune to this. We can tell stories about Jesus and Greater Israel and whatever, and believe that the aliens or somebody who's going to save us or fix everything, technology, engineering, whatever it might be. But those are just stories that help us adhere to our feud with reality. Biophysical reality doesn't get trumped by fantasies and stories. Stories are wonderful, but they don't trump biophysical reality. That takes precedent. We're all dependent on that. So everyone's going to come up with their ideas and their beliefs. And of course, believing something feels good because you don't have to worry about it too much, especially when in the West, in the global North, many people are living a life of leisure, whether they know it or not, even if they're wage slaves. I forget where I read this, but anyway, something like this. We use energy slaves in the form of basically fossil fuels, mostly coming from crude oil, which is portable, transportable, energy dense, and economical, cheap because it was abundant for a while. We have these energy slaves. Oh, I'll go ahead and take a pic of this view. Beautiful fall weather. Let me see what I got. The settings here. Oh, I see. I've got to change my settings to aperture priority. Then I can look at my ISO. White balance. Okay, that's better. So, nice view there. And down here I like because there's some farm animals that I like that are more like pets for these people. This was my fantasy world. Once at one time, buy this house, turn this into a film studio. Somebody bought it. So we can't escape reality. It's impossible. But our leaders have no clue, and they have no incentive to have a clue about reality, the kind of reality I'm talking about, the only reality that matters. So we're going to just kind of slog through this madness. Because we can. So we will go through these predicaments. We will suffer a great deal. All of that. And you can read Eric Michaels or be the honest sorcerer, or there's so many, dothemath.com, so many people that write really well about these subjects. I've been aware of it for ages. It's because I've always been curious about these things. And I read The Limits to Growth back in the 70s, late 70s. And, whatever. Of course, I'm a modern human, so I've been doing other normal stuff my whole life. I'm not a prophet. I wasn't any more prescient or intelligent than anybody else. Anyway, there are good people writing on the subject, but they will have no effect on the majority of people. For example, you have 20 to 30, let's say, Christian Zionists in the United States of America, and that's growing, Pentecostalism and so on. And Zionism is growing in the global south, even in China, where the government tries to crack down on some Christian cults. And then we say, oh, they took away their freedom of religion. But anyway, that's another story. So it's growing because people revert to magical thinking when things get difficult, and life is complex anyway. So what are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to figure it out? I mean, really, it's complicated, it's difficult. It's so much easier to believe that, God has a plan and it's all good, even if you have to suffer and your child has to die of leukemia or whatever. It's God's plan and, it's all good. This is why people really don't care about Palestinians or any kind of narrative of colonialism, because that's what we do. If you go to North America, Europeans, and you think, well, we're going to stay here from the Ozark Mountains to the ocean and kind of have our colonies here, do our thing, and those Indians over there in the wilderness, we'll just leave them alone. We'll share the continent, blah, blah, blah. But then you find oil, and coal, industrial revolution in England, and of course you're talking about global trade because of technology as well, ships and so on, and cotton gins and blah blah blah. And in the old days, the labor-saving device was slaves, people, and animals. They digested calories and did work, so that you didn't have to. You wouldn't have Athenian democracy without slaves, and Aristotle writes about it. So you need that labor saver. So now our labor saver is fossil fuels. So according to what I read, I forget the math, but anyway, something like somebody in the Amazon, some indigenous person, might use like 6 slaves or 12 or whatever it is a day, depending on how you think about it. And an average Canadian, they're in high latitude part of the world, and they use 666. Oh, wow, what a coincidence. Why did they choose that number? 666. I'm just kidding. Anyway, something like that, right? And that those calories or that energy use to do work, transforming chemical energy or whatever kind of energy you're talking about, gravity or other things, into work, getting work done. A lot of that's obviously in the form of fossil fuels. And even if you're talking about electricity, you're not talking about electricity from the ether, static electricity that somehow just pops into your outlet. You're talking about machines that need oil and gas to make, that are producing electricity. So there's no such thing as renewable energy, or there is, but on this scale there's no such thing as free energy or an energy transition or anything like that. At some point, if you're talking about wood and plants, the American Indians, they are transforming the solar energy of herds of buffalo in the grasslands, right, into food and clothing and teepees and whatever. And then they got horses from the Spaniards and they started breeding them. They did a great job at that. They were unstoppable. For 45 years or more, the U.S. government was trying to beat them in a war, and they couldn't. They were really good. They really knew how to live in the plains. And they had a completely sustainable life, could have gone on for thousands of years. But Europeans had fossil fuels, and we built a railroad, iron horse, and we shrunk the continent exponentially. And then people could just stream across North America with no impediments or, So that's what happened. And they couldn't win. You just send tourists out on trains to shoot buffalo until all the buffalo are gone, and then eventually you have no more Indian groups. They have Custer's Last Stand, and then you have revenge against that by having your bury my heart at Wounded Knee thing, and it's over. Finito. So that's what happens. And that those energy slaves in the form of fossil fuels are finite. That's a fact. And the more complex ways we discover to use energy more efficiently, the faster that goes away. Now we can fantasize about fusion or other forms of magical energy, but all of those require materials and energy. And it takes generations to transition from one form of energy to another, energy system, and we don't have that much time, so there's no way out of that predicament. And then human beings, us human beings, human beings aren't going to figure that out because we're built to do this stuff. And, expecting all of us to become wise and enlightened creatures living within limits isn't going to happen. I wish it would be kind of nice if we all got together and coordinated across nation states to work together to create a sustainable geopolitical system, where we could transition to a wonderful, beautiful, lovely, sustainable world of kumbaya. And no, you've got Hegseth, people like that. They just want to be war fighters. That's cool. And a lot of my friends get so excited about beating the Russians or those damn drug cartels or whatever it is. And that's nonsense. That's just keeping a really dastardly business model going. It's like, can I keep the really dastardly business model going? Because it's so cool and it makes me so cool. And you got winners and losers, and we're better than them. Those Muslims, they do things for the wrong reasons. We do things for the right reasons, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you can put right at the doorstep of the United States of America almost everything that's wrong with the world. But you can still point to all the cool stuff, Netflix, cyber trucks, the World Wide Web, even though none of it was invented by some American dude. These are all global projects by and large, and government backed to boot and so on. All the narratives are full of shite, right? They're just nonsense. But we want to believe them because it's cool to believe them, and it makes us feel good, and we want to feel good. So believing these stories is a feel-good thing, and we're not going to give that up. We love to feel good. I love to feel good. It's just that my feel-good doesn't depend on bullshit stories. My feel-good depends on my learning bit by bit, however imperfectly, about reality and experiencing my life. And I'm lucky, I'm privileged. So I grew up in a weird country. I never starved, I wasn't abused, I was healthy, and I got some education, and I got to do stuff. I was a free thinker, I got to make some choices and do some things. Lucky me. The thing that bothers me about all this, I understand the predicament, it is what it is, we're just going to have to get through it, prepare yourself, get ready to do community work, prepare yourself psychologically and spiritually for the inevitable, and blah, 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 there's nothing we can do. I get that, but the thing that haunts me all the time is there not some way to mitigate the suffering that's going on right now? I mean, do we not have that within our power to do if we wanted to? And the answer is we do have the power to mitigate that suffering, but we won't, because the leaders that we depend on, that we think are cool, aren't incentivized to do that. I mean, nobody cares what goes on in the Middle East or Ukraine. Not really. I mean, it's fun to watch, to, pick a side and get all outraged and excited thinking you know something. You listen to people like Scott Ritter or anybody on the mainstream media. They seem to know what people are doing and what Putin's thinking or Trump's thinking or Xi's thinking or what the strategy is, what they can and can't do with their missiles and so on and so forth. They don't know shit. They know less than the rest of us, and even the leaders who are in charge of the actual thing, the strategies and tactics on the battlefield, the kinds of missiles being developed and how they're going to get the energy and print the money. They don't even know. I mean, they're doing their best, but it's their best guess at the moment. And if you look at history, from 1776 onward, look at the violence and the failures. Not just like the fact that we took over the West, we killed the Indians, and we won World War II all by ourselves with one hand tied behind our back because of the damn liberals or the damn whatever. They wouldn't let us win in Vietnam, whatever it was. It's just a horror story, and it never ends. Look at Martin Scorsese's, biography, documentary, how he grew up, his movies, and so on. Just throw a dart at a timeline and say, how was it during the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, or whatever. It was nasty and ugly the whole way through. I mean, whether you think Bush won, Desert Storm was a huge success. I mean, where did that lead to? It led to 9/11. Where did that lead to? It just led to, ISIS. And of course, we have nothing to do with that. Sam Harris will tell you we do things for the right reasons. Steven Pinker will say we're fighting for the Enlightenment, and so on. But in fact, we're making a mess just because we can, and we think we're right because the mess we're making includes cool shit, like the NFL. Multi-streaming. You can watch 5 games at once, and it's so wonderful. The war on drugs is a joke. It's just an excuse because they don't like some people in our leadership don't like those Venezuelans much. It won't put a dent in drug trafficking because a lot of the drugs are coming from other places. You can't stop it. It's a red herring. It's a joke. They'll just come through other areas. And imagine if you think that destroying 6 boats is somehow putting a dent in the drug trade. I mean, look at the drug consumption in the United States, which is driving the whole thing, by the way, because people are sick. They're psychologically ill. They have a disease called addiction to drugs, and they're sick, and we're not helping them. So it comes in. Imagine if 6 boats were blown up. Just imagine how many subs and boats got through. Because it sure as hell didn't stop anything, right? But we think so because, that's what they say on TV. And we can't deal with reality or complexity or any of it, systems thinking. We can't deal with biophysical reality. We can't deal with we don't know thermodynamics. We don't know anything. Soil biology. We don't understand the limits to growth, limits to resources and energy, and all these things. And we don't want to know it because it's no fun. So we're going to become Christian Zionists. So then we're going to believe that if you rebuild the temple somewhere in Israel, it's going to bring the Armageddon and the tribulation, apocalypse, all that stuff. And so Peter Thiel, a billionaire who got lucky investing in Facebook, runs around talking about Satan and the Antichrist, and the Antichrist could be LGBTQ. It could be Greta Thunberg, whatever. It's like, it's so batshit crazy, but people listen to it and they believe it, and they pay the guy tens of thousands of dollars to hear him spout this bullshit. And Dries and all these people are nutcases, fantasists. They're total idiots, but we think they're cool because they're rich. And we worship money. Why wouldn't we? Money makes the world go around. You can't do anything without it. You don't have any agency whatsoever if you don't have money. And I think about the modern monetary theory because I worked in China and Hong Kong and Japan in particular for many, many years. And you look at Japan and all those office buildings are full of people doing stuff. What the fuck are they doing? It takes energy to keep those offices going. You have to print money to keep those people in a job. They have to buy bonds. They have to buy stocks. They have to figure out the modern monetary theory, keep the whole thing going. And the construct is predicated on, future stores of energy and materials that we don't have, that we're definitely running out of. There's no doubt about that. So the idea is just to burn everything up as fast as possible. because we don't know how to do anything else. So where are all those office people going to go if they can't ride the train for an hour and a half into Tokyo and walk into their office building and sit at a desk for 10 hours? What are they going to do with themselves? How are they going to pay for sushi and beer and whiskey? Oh, 私は日系ウイスキー大好きです。すっごく美味しいんだよ。whatever it is we're into. And it's the same thing in China. China's got to grow. It's got to bring everybody out of poverty. Then my friends tell me, but Steve, China's going through a demographic crisis. Okay, Europe is, America is. China has 1.48 billion people. Can you do the math there? Do they have resources? Do they have capability? Are they educated? Are they competing well? Yes. So this competition, Thucydides' trap, or whatever you want to call it, it's just going to keep chugging along, and America has to win because that's all it does is make war and win. War is a racket. That's the business model. That's the core of it. Without it, you're nothing. That's why you don't have a peace dividend ever. The U.S. wins the Cold War. We won the Cold War. And what comes after? Is it any good? Do you really think the world's that much better off just because you have some new gadgets? I mean, look around. People are feeling really stressed out. And the kids are having a hard time, and the suicide rate and whatever. Gun crime in the States. I mean, does it ever get any better, really? It just gets bigger. More people, more trouble. Yeah, the demographic problem is everywhere. And it's exacerbated by all kinds of things. Pollution is a problem. Microplastics and PFAS and all these kind of pollution that just can't be bioremediated that easily. And it builds up, and eventually you have problems, right? There you have the thing, right? It's just not going to stop just because you wish it so. And my friends, a lot of my friends are very self-righteous. They're arrogant, and they don't think so. They think they're modest people and good guys and so on. But they actually think they're better. There's this supremacy thing, exceptionalism or exceptionism, in the sense that the United States is an exception to the rule of law. I mean, we don't have to obey the international law, but we can kill anybody who disobeys it, but we don't have to. Rules don't apply to us. And when we see Trump and J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel and Curtis Yarvin and all the neo-reactionaries, we think, oh my God, where did that come from? How could that happen? It was inevitable, and we encouraged it. If you want to be an exception to the rule, and you want to, not play by the rules, eventually it's going to get you. People do get angry. Palestinians want to fight back. Oh my God, how could that be? You can't put yourself in their shoes. You're incapable. I want to live in a prison camp. I want European Ashkenazi Jews and American Jews to come to the Middle East and take my land. Why wouldn't I? But in fact, they don't want that. So there's a conflict. What happens? Well, little bighorn, and then bury my heart at Wounded Knee. So nobody cares, really. I mean, so you have No Kings rally. Maybe 3 to 4 million, under 5 million people go out. And there's 20 to 30,000 Christian Zionists. There are more Christian Zionists in the world than Jews in the whole world. There are more Christian Zionists in the United States than people who identify as being Jewish in the world. So there's that. Without Christian Zionism, you don't have this problem in the Middle East. And you have to really understand that, after Nazi Germany, you feel guilty. It was bad, my bad, oops. And the winners want to feel righteous. Okay, Soviets feel righteous. Then what do they do to their people? Americans feel righteous. Then what do they do to people? They make the same mistakes. Anyway, you don't want the Jews in Europe because you still don't like them. You don't want them, but you can't kill them. Genocide's not good. So you make a place for them to go, and you hope that they all go there. And then you have these back to the land kibbutzim, intentional communities like far-right groups have in Arkansas. We just want to live with white people, our kind, because based on our research, we've learned that there are different kinds of people and that they do much better if they stick to their own kind. And we know that because of Neoplatonism. How clever. Wow. I did all this research in Neoplatonism and came up with a good argument, which means a good story, for why we should have a white Christian ethno-state in the US, even if it's a patchwork, put together, woven together with cryptocurrency and in the internet. And eventually we'll just gobble up more and more little communities until we have 2 or 3 states. And of course the blacks can have their place. The real Irish and the one true Scotsman can have their place. And everybody will be so happy and well off then. They don't think about energy, Jevons paradox, complexity theory, because the story, the Neoplatonic story, is so much more fun, easy to believe, simple, and feels good to be with your own people. So, that's why even Arabs don't care about Muslim Palestinians, because their leadership is incentivized just like ours is. And also, they're tribal. I mean, you don't just have, you have Sunni and Shia and so on. Just like with Christianity, you have sects. It's sectarian. And so they fight among themselves all the time for resources. Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence was so shocked when that guy shot the man for stealing from his well. Well, if your tribe depended on that water, you would be pretty draconian in your punishment of thieves of that resource. You just would. And so there you have it. So the lemons are coming along, the oranges are coming along. I saw a lot of oranges the other day when I was visiting the beautiful Roman ruins of places in Portugal. You got to remember I think I'll blow out the background. So, the Romans, the technologies they had, they could make clay bricks forever and a day if they don't burn out the soil and so on. But growth has a way of overextending itself, overshooting, even in the Roman times. But you look at the simple technologies they had for thousands of years, and how well they worked. I mean, I recognize the tile here. The Romans used bricks. There's just so many things that are so familiar. You'd go back to that town in Portugal 300 years BC, and you would recognize everything. It would be a little different, a lot different culturally and so on, but it all makes sense. Tiled floors, baths, toilets. Anyway, I'm always curious about the details, like, after you take a shit, what do you do? And just little things, But you look at the cookery they had and everything. Yeah, so human beings, everything alive, whether it's a cockroach or a person, all the generations before that cockroach or person reproduced, or it wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here. So that's an amazing thing, is it not? It's like somehow all those generations of you that spawned you, your DNA brought it into the world, managed to survive, That's freaky, man. When you think about it. Oh no, I should have F10 for this puppy. Get some depth of field, not shallow depth of field. So that's an amazing thing to think about. And then when you get to a point where you have that population bottleneck, which we're heading towards, you're looking at billions fewer potential, genetic combinations coming down the pike. And we might be responsible for our species, to dwindle down to 1,000 or 2,000. At some point, if you don't have the energy slaves, you're not going to have the materials for a complex, high-tech, modern civilization, and people are going to be living much simpler lives. Nate Hagen's Great Simplification, you talk about the superorganism, you talk about hyperobjects, blah, 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 blah. People have wonderful, made-up, lovely terms for things, but it's nothing new. It's not rocket science, or even more profound brain science when interfaced with sociology and human psychology, culture. Then it gets really freaky, right? That's complex. So that's where we're headed, this simplification thing, and it's not gonna not happen. So, but again, I have to go back to what I was talking about. The thing that really bothers me about the whole thing, because it's like, yeah, dude, I get you. You want to be a billionaire. You believe that your race is superior. I get it. Who's the best driver you ever saw? You, of course. But I'm like, okay, that's fine. Dwell in that. Let that drive you. Let that, inspire you. And, hopefully you'll be a billionaire and you'll have all these things you can do with your money. Most of the time it's pretty no good if you look at the bigger picture, but if you look at the smaller picture, it'd be like, yeah, you funded research into that tragic, cancer, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, these friends of mine, these people I know and, see in the world, they really just don't care about human suffering or animal suffering or ecocide or destroying rivers. Or they pretend like they do, but they don't really, because they wouldn't sacrifice anything to stop it. And, 3 to 5 million people marching for no more kings is nothing. It's a demonstration, but it doesn't shift the culture at all. And what will happen eventually is, as we're being performative revolutionaries, things will happen economically and geopolitically that force us to become real revolutionaries. And then what happens? Because we didn't really think it through or plan it out, it's bloody, it's violent, it's horrific, and we have a bad, bad time for 10 or 20 or 30 years, whatever it turns out to be. And we just go along with it. Gotta defeat Iran, gotta defeat China, gotta defeat Russia. NATO has to be bigger, There has to be more weapons. We have to expend more energy and materials on that project rather than learning what we really need to do to go through the predicaments that are inevitable, that can't be stopped. And that's what frustrates me. That's why I get testy, uppity with my friends. Because they're so sure of themselves. They're so hubristic. They have these, in the simpler times, you had these little community fountain where you get your water. And they even call your septic tank, the people who come out to work on it, it's called a font. Anything dealing with the water. But, back in the day, you had to walk water. But back to it, I just took a picture of this fountain. They just are so cavalier, nonchalant about, people dying and getting killed and, counting the bodies. Like 12 more Russians got killed yesterday in the war than Ukrainians. Yippee. They don't know how many. It'll be years before we have even anywhere near an accurate body count. They don't know anything. But they read The Economist or Business Week or Financial Times or something, and it told them that, their team is winning, and they feel really good about that, even though the whole enterprise is a losing proposition for them, their family, their community, their nation, their species, life in general. So what? What's the real cost of this, that, and the other thing? What's the true cost, including externalities and all that kind of thing? You get a different calculus. But also, you can't imagine because you're not the one suffering. If you grew up in the favela, you might feel a bit different in Rio or something. Or there are still billions of people around the world. I've traveled in countries where things were a lot simpler. I remember China in 1980. It was night and day from today. So a lot of people know what it's like to carry the water. They can swim. They understand suffering. And you have your Iran-Contra, you have that whole thing, what happened in Central America during the Reagan period. And, a lot of people, innocent people, get killed and injured and tortured. And then you have a revolution. Why? Why did they do that? Why don't they just want, Americans to come down there and run the country for them? What's wrong with them? Don't they know we're the best managers in the world, that we're innovative, creative, dynamic? They know that we just want their shit and we want to profit from it. Period. And they're not even adverse to that if it improves their lives a bit. But you humiliate them for a generation, and eventually they can't take it anymore. And death is preferable to living under their yoke, so they fight back. And then you have some good old boys. You're tying yellow ribbons around the old oak tree, and you're mourning the loss of. I saw a report, and I feel terrible about the loss of this American family that moved to Israel, and they lost their son. He died. He was a hostage. He suffered and died. He lost an arm before he died. It's tragic. It's sad. I feel bad for them. But they wouldn't mention. She was saying it's universal that mothers mourn their children. And I was like, are you going to mention the mothers in Gaza or the West Bank or Syria or Lebanon? Do they count? They really don't. They're mothers, but they're not the right kind of mothers. So it's universal to my species of human being because I'm a supremacist. I'm better than they are. But I'm not going to mention them. Now, of course, there are so many Israelis that do mention them. And they're just a different kind of person. You know, read Jonathan Haidt or whoever, moral arcs and differences. Hola, bom dia. You know, what makes a conservative a conservative? How much of it is genetic? How much is behavior? You know, learned experience. Anyway, we're plastic to a degree, but we have our propensities. But there are plenty of people in Israel who feel for the mothers of Gaza and the West Bank. But that sick ideology has taken root in the world, and so they have no chance, basically. It's going to be a slow grind. But what goes around comes around, and one day the Silicon Valley of wherever, Haifa or wherever, is not going to be operable anymore. They won't have the energy, they won't have the water, they won't have the resources. It'll burn out, and things will get ugly for them also. So you might have a generation of triumphant, well, more than a generation. You can go back to the turn of the 20th century all the way till now. Maybe you have another 30 years of lording over the region with your nukes and your money from the United States and weapons. And eventually it'll just wear down. You know, if America wants to fund a war, they need the energy, they need the finance, they need the materials to overwhelm all these other countries. And I don't think they're going to take it anymore. We had soft power, we had the capability to sell people on our bullshit, but I think we've run out of that. We've spent all of our goodwill in the world, and so I think a lot of people around the world are deciding that, you know, I don't like Maduro, but I don't want America to invade my country, so fuck it. I don't like the Islamic Revolution in Iran, but you know, I don't like Israel and the United States bombing us either, assassinating our leaders, so fuck it. It's time to fight. And obviously, China doesn't want to see it, you know, Opium Wars 6.7 or whatever it is. They don't want to be humiliated like they were. They won't stand for it. So eventually the white supremacy, the Anglo sphere shrinks. It just falls apart. And it gets its comeuppance. It's just normal. If you look at history, read any historian, you'll see these cycles. And then you want to believe that you're different. It's different now. We have the technology. we're not going to have Star Trek Federation, you know. And even Star Trek is incentivized by gaining more power and materials to fight all the bad species of intelligent life in the world, in the universe. We can't exist without an enemy. And we won't be an animal of nature again until there's only a few thousand of us left. Okay, that's it. William T. out.